Call Don now, 682-1270. News Talk 1270 KIML.
News Talk 1270 KIML. Don Carpenter Show. Welcome back. 7:46, and we're going to go right to the phones. We have a few lines flashing, so I'm going to try to play phone line roulette, and hopefully I get the right one. On the line right now, we should have our special guest, Senator Rand Paul. Are you there, Senator?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you so much for calling in. I know you're going to have a very busy day, but I want to welcome you to our beautiful state. Looks like we're going to have some, at least some nice weather for you. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing out here today.
Well, I just happened to be running for the presidency and decided I'd stop in Wyoming and see if you had some good Republicans out here.
Well, we certainly have a nice surplus of those out here. Of course, you're in Cheyenne this morning. You'll be in Casper later on today. So tell us a little bit about the message that you have for us out here in Wyoming today.
I'm a physician. I'm an eye surgeon and practiced for 20 years in a small town in Kentucky. But I got very worried about how much debt the country was piling on. We borrow $1 million every minute, and I just became concerned that even Republicans weren't standing up to this massive onslaught of debt, massive onslaught of taxes, massive onslaught of regulations. And I just thought government had grown too large, and I said, someone's got to speak out. And my wife told me to be careful, I might get elected, and sure enough, I got elected. And so I'm trying to fight against the Washington machine, the machine that takes not only our property, takes our hard-earned cash, but really ultimately takes our liberty. And so I think we need to have a much smaller government like our founding fathers intended. And really there's no excuse for government spending money it doesn't have. We shouldn't be borrowing money from China to basically turn around and send it to Pakistan. So something's got to change, and I want to be part of one of those who said that I've had enough, and I want Washington to reform itself. Well,
I know you'll get a lot of people that will agree with that out this part of the country. Now, of course, you are an eye doctor. I saw an interesting story last week, and I thought it kind of speaks to your character. While all of your opponents were eating corn dogs and making making all kinds of fried food at the Iowa State Fair, you actually were doing surgeries for less fortunate people. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I thought it was just a very interesting story.
Well, I went down to Haiti with the University of Utah, the John Moran Eye Institute, and we did about 200 cataract surgeries on people, most of whom were blind. And there's probably nothing more rewarding than to be able to take the patch off of someone's eye after they've had eye surgery, and they go from not seeing at all to being able to see again. And just that, sort of like a small miracle, seeing these people and seeing the smiles on their faces as they see again. And I went last year to Guatemala and this year to Haiti, and have been doing it for years in Kentucky as well, trying to help people who cannot help themselves.
Well, and it really, I don't know how you find the time to be a United States Senator and still be able to do surgery, but it really is it was just an amazing story, and I think it kind of goes to show, obviously, your dad's a doctor as well, kind of shows that you were raised right, I think.
Well, we were raised to believe that we are our brother's keeper, but in a very personal way, not in a way that the government is supposed to be doing that, but we individually do have an obligation. Physicians have an obligation to treat the poor. Hospitals have an obligation to treat the poor. But it's not a mandate from government, and that government doesn't dictate that people take care of others, but we should, and it is an obligation as a people and who we are.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, how's the campaign coming along so far?
We've had a big Western trip. I've been out here for about a week. We went to Washington State, up to Alaska, back to Washington, over to Idaho, and today we'll be in Wyoming and tomorrow in Utah. We've had big and boisterous and enthusiastic crowds everywhere we've gone. I think the West, a lot of people came West because they wanted to get away from big government. Some came for religious liberty, but many of them just want to be left alone. And I'm the one person on the stage, the one person in the U.S. Senate who stood for 10.5 hours for your right to be left alone, that we shouldn't allow President Obama to collect all our phone records. We shouldn't allow him to collect gun records. I'm for keeping the government out of your affairs. And so I think we've been well received in the West.
Well, and actually that's feeds right into the next thing I wanted to ask about. You seem to be the only candidate that's really out front on the privacy issues, on blocking the NSA and keeping even the eminent domain issue. I mean, you really seem to be the only candidate that's giving that a lot of attention. Why do you think your opponents aren't giving that more attention?
Well, I think it's pretty important that private property not be taken by eminent domain by the government and given to some other private property owner. The Supreme Court made a really, really awful decision called the KIML decision back in 2005, and they actually allow this to happen. And one of the big supporters of this and beneficiaries and a guy who makes money off of taking other people's land is actually Donald Trump. There was a woman by the name of Vera Koking who lived for 30 years in the same house and wanted to continue to do so. But Donald Trump built a casino next to her and decided that he needed her land or her house for a parking lot for his limousines. And so he just sent the goons from the government over there to take it. And through eminent domain, they were able to take her property and give it to him. And I think that really is something that most conservatives, if they knew that was something Donald Trump supported, they would be aghast. And I think there's been sort of this little surge for Donald Trump, but I think the people need to know that he's a guy who supports taking land from one private property owner and giving it to himself.
Now, we've heard these concerns with Donald Trump before. I mean, do you have any idea what would be the reason that he's been getting this much attention?
I think because he's a celebrity TV star, that's different than most of the other candidates, and so there's been a lot of attention showered on him. But I think he's also pretending to be a conservative, and so, I came out of the Tea Party movement a couple of years ago, and we were, really concerned about fake conservatives and Republicans who would say one thing and do another. And here he is saying now he's, opposed to Obamacare and he's for securing the border. But, just a few years ago, he was on the other side of every issue. He's been pro-abortion. He's been pro-Obamacare. And really a couple of years ago, he didn't seem to be too concerned at all about the border. He was criticizing Romney for being too strict on the border. And so I think people have to be concerned about sincerity. And hopefully this is a temporary phenomenon and people come to their senses and say, you know what, we want a real conservative, not a fake conservative.
Well, and of course, your record speaks for itself. One of the other issues that you've been really out front about, and I know a lot of people here in Wyoming would appreciate it, is the defunding of Planned Parenthood. It's kind of an uphill battle with the way the Senate is made up now. Do you see any movement towards that direction?
Well, I think the videos are horrific. I've always been pro-life. I've always voted against funding Planned Parenthood. But the videos really have shocked even me. I'm a physician. I've seen a lot of gruesome things, but these videos are just alarming, and I think they're changing the debate. I think people who have cavalierly said, if I don't have to look at this and I don't have to think about this, maybe it's okay. And now people are looking and hearing about this and saying, my goodness, what kind of people would allow this to happen? And what kind of people would allow taxpayer dollars to go to this? So I forced a vote on it 2 weeks ago. But in the Senate, you have to get 60 votes, and so we need 6 or 7 Democrats. We lost one Republican and picked up a Democrat or two, but we're still a few votes short. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to strive and do this, because anybody who votes to send taxpayer dollars to this horrible group really should have to meet the voters, and the voters ought to let them know what they think. But I'm going to continue leading the fight and trying to defund Planned Parenthood.
Well, and now you mentioned that you picked up a couple of Democrats on that vote. Of course, one of those Democrats was Senator Manchin, I believe, which you also have a common agreement on the issue of coal and the administration's war on coal. And if you haven't heard it yet today, you're going to hear a lot about this in Wyoming. What can be done to stop this out-of-control EPA and the administration's war on coal?
I'd get rid of the EPA. I think really we ought to have state control of this. So if you have mining of coal in Wyoming, which I know you have a lot of, we have a lot of it in Kentucky, or we used to have a lot of it in Kentucky. But, the state ought to control that. I'm not against all rules, but I would have the rules be state-based from people who live here, and also people who understand that thousands of jobs are associated with the coal industry and with the power industry. So I think the federal government ought to butt out of this. And if I were in charge, I'd appoint somebody to the EPA and tell them, make it go away, get it out of our affairs. And if there's anything that has to do with interstate air quality, maybe so. But let's get the EPA out of our lives, out of our businesses. And what we've had really right now is not very balanced at all. I don't think they consider what they're doing to the livelihoods and the lives of thousands of people who've lost their jobs in the coal industry. So, no, I fight them at every turn, and I fight every regulation, and we will try to use special review legislation to try to overturn these regulations that have come forward.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the state of the coal industry in Kentucky. I'm from back east, and my grandfather was a West Virginia coal miner, so I've seen what happened in West Virginia and Western Pennsylvania and Kentucky. Actually, that could happen here, and I'm glad we have someone in the Senate from back east that is fighting for that coal industry.
Yeah, everybody needs to understand that quite a significant amount of our electricity comes from coal. In some states, it's 80-90% of the electricity, but even nationwide, it's somewhere between 40 and 50% comes from coal. And if you eliminate that, particularly if you eliminate it precipitously, there's going to be people who are cold in the winter, and there's going to be people that are very hot in the summer. And what most of these people who want to shut down the coal industry and shut down the whole mining, they don't understand is that, or they don't acknowledge that electricity is actually an amazing thing that allows us to be safer, civilized, and live longer. The countries that produce the 10 most highest amount of electricity live 25 years longer than the countries that produce the bottom 10 that produce the least amount of electricity. So electricity is something that really does save lives and allows us to live a longer, safer, more comfortable life.
Well, absolutely, and I know you only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to give you just a chance to tell everyone listening up here in Gillette why we should vote for you when the election comes around.
I think we have many Republicans who profess to be conservative, but when push comes to shove, they won't actually do anything to balance the budget. Many of them will vote for a balanced budget amendment, but I actually have put forward 3 budgets that actually balance. And unfortunately, only about a third of the Republicans in the Senate have voted for my budgets that balance. So we need somebody who's serious about actually balancing the budget to be the president. We need somebody who's serious about getting rid of this crummy tax code we have. I would get rid of all 70,000 pages. I'd get rid of the IRS, and I'd have a tax return everybody could fill out on one page. 14.5% for individuals and 14.5% for companies. We've been chasing jobs and companies overseas. I think it's about time we changed the tax code, got rid of the regulations, so companies would do the opposite. I would like to see companies beating down our door trying to come into the United States and not the opposite. So I will dramatically make government smaller. I'll obey the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and I'll protect everybody's individual liberty, and I'll absolutely make sure that the government's not responsible for taking your land through regulation or through eminent domain.
Well, amen to that. Thank you so much, Senator Paul. Again, you're going to be speaking at 9:30 at the Little America Hotel in Cheyenne. That's probably we can't get down there that quickly, but you'll also be at the Wyoming Theater at the Ramkota Hotel in Casper at 2:30 p.m. if anybody wants to go down and see you speak. Thank you so much, Senator Rand Paul. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and hopefully we'll get you out in our neck of the woods again sometime soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, Senator Rand Paul, 2:30 p.m., the Wyoming Theater at the Ramkota Hotel if you want to go see Senator Paul. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. News Talk 1270, KIML.
Listen every Tuesday for coverage of the Pronghorns, Wild, Camels, Cowboys, and pro sports. The Tuesday Morning Quarterbacks Hour. Don Carpenter on News Talk 1270, KIML. KIML. KIML.